The U.S. Navy's Pacific Fleet reportedly getting ready to hold a number of operations in the South China Sea next month, demonstrating massive force against China. The report comes as the Chinese propaganda machine is working to refute the White House assertion that Beijing is interfering in our midterm elections and taking part in predatory economic policies. In a statement today, the Chinese Foreign Ministry accused Vice President Pence after his speech yesterday of malicious slander and urging the United States to correct its wrongdoing. By the way, most media outlets, we would like to point out to you, didn't get a comment from the White House or the Pentagon and just simply went with the Chinese propaganda, forgetting what they actually are writing about, which is rising tensions and the potential for a military confrontation with China. Joining us tonight is retired four-star general, Fox Business chief strategic analyst, General Jack Keane. Good to have you with us, General. And the statements that the Navy wants to put on a show of force, is that a good idea, or is it likely to fail in any way, intimidating the Chinese?
Well, the Chinese are likely not going to be intimidated by that, but what we really need is a very comprehensive strategy in dealing with the Chinese aggression, the military just being a portion, of that strategy. But what Vice President Pence did in calling out the Chinese in the strongest of terms that any government official has ever used in dealing with China is really long overdue. After 8 years of appeasement by the Obama administration in dealing with China's aggressive and malign behavior that's been going on actually for 10, 15 years, finally, we have an administration that's looking at them clearly and has stated unequivocally that in their national security strategy and national defense strategy that we're in a big power competition with Russia and China, and they have got it exactly right when they say that the long-term strategic threat is China to the national interest of the United States and to the security of the American people. And I'll tell you, that is really a mouthful because it is actually driving the implementation of a strategy to push back on China now and do it comprehensively.
Is one of the country's most distinguished generals, vice chair of the Army staff. Let me ask you this: why the South China Sea? And putting forward this force, it seems to me that we are at a military disadvantage because we're in their region. We're on their doorsteps. We are within their, if you will, hegemony. And that makes for a very difficult display of force that would have the effect that apparently some of the leaders in the Navy want to have.
Yeah. Well, no, you put your finger on a problem. I mean, we're an ocean away dealing with the Russians, and the truth is, even though we have a Pacific fleet, we're an ocean away dealing with the Chinese. We're considerably geographically offset. All that said, what China's near-term objective is to control and dominate the Indo-Pacific region with the focus on the South China Sea and the Western Pacific. And they have been making some significant gains there. Their long-term objective, President Xi says somewhere around 20 years, is to replace the United States as a preeminent global power in the world. Now, what we have had them doing is they're conducting what they call this thing unrestricted warfare. But what that term means to them is that they will pursue their geopolitical objectives that I just mentioned, control and domination in the near term, and then replace the United States, and do that with all the means at their disposal short of war. They don't want to go to war with the United States, but they will use economic warfare.
Them, I would assume.
Yeah, that's correct. So economic warfare, that's tariffs, that's stealing intellectual property. Sure. It's these high-interest loans with emerging nations where they default. Then they do, and we've seen this, massive influence campaigns where they're meddling in our elections, and that's what Vice President Pence is doing. Right. They're meddling in all the elections in the Pacific, to include Australia.
When President Trump pointed out that they were meddling in our elections, trying to intervene, carrying out a propaganda campaign in our own country, he was met in some quarters with derision because they said it just couldn't be. And sure enough, we're looking at the Des Moines Register with inserts. We're watching the national media and local media outlets taking all of this nonsense from the Chinese minister in this country and as well as in Beijing, and just simply spreading it around without any comment. It seems to me we're right now, this president promised we'd have a smart government. And I have to tell you, that means a very, very smart military. And I just see us still struggling to be smart.
No, we are. We're trying to get our arms around this problem. First of all, let me just mention one of the issues we have. We've got still in this country a delusion and the delusion was if we help China economically, introduce them to international markets, that they would become an internationally responsive country and political reform would follow.
Bush,
in other words, democracy. What nonsense that is.
Yeah.
We know now that they're more authoritarian than they've ever been, and they're going to trample over the United States if they can get away with. We have got to begin to stand up to them, not just with rhetoric, but pushing back economically and pushing back militarily.
You know, I would love to continue this conversation. We're out of time, but you know, in our next discussion, General, if you would, let's take up what is happening with the Chinese in this hemisphere and whatever happened to the Monroe Doctrine that President Obama dismissed while he was in office. Great to have you with us, General, as always. Thanks so much.
Yeah, good talking to you, Lou.